Welcome to Solutions OP Clinical Trials Podcast. My name is Olga and I'm the Managing Director of Solutions OP. We are a small team of experienced professionals working on clinical trials in the United Kingdom. I'll use our podcast to discuss hot topics in clinical trials and provide analysis of the latest trends and challenges in pharma and medical device industries, not just in the UK but globally. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the latest episode of the podcast. As you know, I'm trying to invite people who work in different startups in different areas in disease indications from different countries and regions of the world. We are trying to understand a little bit more what people work on at the moment, what kind of problems they have in terms of research and generating data for clinical research and getting their product to the market. So my guest today is Georgi Kadrev, who is a Bulgarian entrepreneur. He's involved in many ventures during the years. He's an excellent mathematician with a background in computer science. He's also a co-founder and CEO of Kelvin Health, which is a Bulgarian startup working in developing thermography AI technology for vascular diagnostics. So Georgi is also a board member of a Digital Health and Innovation Cluster Bulgaria, and somehow he managed to find time to teach at the Faculty of Mathematics. And I would like to specifically thank him today because he's interrupting his annual leave just to speak to me. So thank you, Georgi, for your time and joining me today. I would like to ask you the first question just to tell me a bit more about your company and what at the moment you're doing, and in general overview or anything you'd like to share about your work.
Thank you for having me, Olga, and it's my pleasure. I always love to share about the mission of Kelvin Health, and this is a venture, actually a spin-off venture from another company that we started more than 13 years ago. Because our background is in visual image recognition, before it was a modern thing as it is today. And the opportunity occurred to help in diagnosing different kind of infectious diseases. The actual occasion was the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, an idea by a team of medical scientists to apply thermography and artificial intelligence analyzing the thermogram images to detect COVID. And this was a little bit extravagant, but something that showed some potential. Still, in the next year, after the start of the pandemic, things changed multiple times, and we even experimented with application of thermography to breast cancer screening, which is one of the most controversial applications. And we ended up building a solution to empower the vascular specialist or even the non-specialist to speed up the process of diagnosing artery health problems. In particular, we're very much focused currently on peripheral artery disease and its escalation to peripheral ischemia and eventually carotid hypoperfusion. So these two vascular territories are something that we want to make very easy the process of detecting problems and clots or stenosis in these vascular areas. So the whole premise is that this is something that's very hard to diagnose currently in a wider setting. So on the invasive end of the spectrum, we have the X-ray angiography or other types of angiography that require typically hospitalization and hold some risk for the patient, like kidney problems because of the contrast agent, etc. And on the non-invasive end of the spectrum, we have methods like the ankle brachial or the toe brachial index, which are not very reliable and still require some training of the person who is performing the test. So this came very handy to apply our image recognition background and the availability of mobile thermography and build a solution that can empower and assist the diagnostic process in a much wider scope.
That sounds very interesting field that you've picked, and I think there is a high demand, especially for imaging diagnostics.
I see quite a lot of startups working in radiology, for example, detecting tumors and that kind of things. So I think your niche is quite unique. So probably your idea is people to be able to use this tool to do some kind of pre-screening, and if they discover something, then this could trigger further assessment. Is that how you think about your product?
Yeah, to a huge extent, what we want to enable is like ultra early spotting of signs of vascular disease. And this is not exactly ultra early in the general context, but it's in the context of how currently the healthcare system engages with patients with peripheral artery disease. The main part of the problem is that when you report a problem like a leg pain or claudication, this is typically quite advanced stage of the disease. And one of the huge comorbidities of peripheral artery disease is diabetes, which additionally contributes to hiding the symptoms because of lower sensitivity to pain. So if you have something where you can, even at your family doctor or a podiatrist, have to empower the process of quite reliably detecting a severe change in the blood supply, this can basically be a go-to instrument as part of the healthcare system to detect the patient much earlier on their patient journey, so they can have something way cheaper and way better protecting their health and increasing the chances to save their legs. Because unfortunately, late diagnosed peripheral artery disease escalates to critical ischemia, and it has a very high percentage of first taking to limb and taking to life in less than 5 years. Just one note on your first remark that I want to make is that actually imaging has been a very hot field in the last decade with the rise of the artificial intelligence applications to various types of existing traditional, let's call them medical imaging modalities like X-ray, MRI, CT scans. But something that's quite interesting in Kelvin Health is the fact that it uses a non-popular modality, the modality of thermal imaging. And the good thing about it is that it can be very portable, it can be very mobile, it can be practically accessible to anyone, both cost-wise and form factor-wise. And that's why we got so excited to apply our background in imaging, and not non-medical imaging, in particular to the medical application of analysis of thermal images.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah, I think you've picked very, very good field and very niche and very interesting. So I wish you really great luck with your work. And because I know you're very into artificial intelligence and you follow the field and you've been in many accelerators, you're also working as a mentor. I don't know when you do all that, to be honest with you, but you managed to do all this. So tell me, how do you feel about AI and medical diagnostic? Do you think the field is overheated? Do you think AI has a big potential in medical diagnostics? Just what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that as with the adoption of every new technology trends, there's like initially very highly increased level of expectations, then some disappointment, and then basically settling to something that's realistic and normal. To a certain extent, though, the recent uptrend towards AI analysis is, I think, for a reason. Because now, with enough data, machine learning algorithms can be quite reliably trained to detect things in images, speaking very broadly. It might be an anomaly, it might be a malformation, it might be a particular spot of something. It depends a lot on the therapeutic area and the modality. But the AI really holds the promise of being able to automate a lot of the detection work, at least some initial stage of triage or assisting or helping to resolve like hard to solve diagnostic situation. And the important part of the equation here is the availability of data, because for existing imaging modalities with X-rays, MRIs, etc., as I mentioned earlier, we have quite a lot of array of information through practically any hospital or any healthcare provider. For thermography, it's an interesting challenge, but also from a business competitive point of view, an interesting advantage to a huge extent is that they're not non-existent thermal imaging data sets with enough power, with enough number of patients, and with enough reliable, scientifically proven results. And this is something that we basically we bite the bullet, and we decided we're going to do that. We're going to take thermal images of as many patients as possible that are also examined with the traditional methods. Let's say in our case, the gold standard of X-ray angiography. If they're anyway going to go there and have the angiography done, then we pack ourselves with this process and take thermal images of the patient before and after angiography, for example. So to wrap it up, I think that AI, especially in imaging, is something that's just the very nature of it. And the technologies and to a certain extent the data sets have evolved enough to provide something that can really save a lot of time and help solve some of the inaccuracies that are inherent to any human driven process. Of course, machines are also making mistakes, and that's why important where exactly in the diagnostic workflow do you engage with such a solution and how much of a trust do you put in it. But definitely as an assistant, it can be a very helpful one.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. I think I agree with you. I think that the imaging, particularly that part in diagnostic, I think there is a huge potential for AI in that field. I'm not sure about the other bits where you have to use like source data from hospital medical records and use that as a data for your model. I'm not sure how accurate that would be, because if it's a data generated by humans, more or less, it's different quality, and there are a lot of pitfalls, I think, in data generated by humans. But imaging, if we're talking about imaging, I think that could be really powerful too. I agree on this. But the other...
I would say, if I may add on that, I would say for an imaging, it's a no-brainer. For analysis of unstructured data, I think it's questionable, but to a certain extent, I'm kind of optimistic about that too. Just because of the rise of the recent trends, and they're not that recent anymore, like almost 2 years now, with the explosion of the large language models. They have kind of enough capacity to basically extract structured data from unstructured data. And with that said, as we've seen this with our previous company now for more than 13 years, as I shared, no matter the fact that it was not in the medical space, but practically any business-defined problem that requires artificial intelligence holds the necessity of defining the problem in the right way. So what is the structure of the data that you really want, and can you validate that whatever it is being the output of the, let's say, AI process, it's actually accurate? And if this is so, you build the confidence of starting to trust enough to this. Of course, it's a matter of context. How do you utilize this kind of knowledge and understanding? We can think of it as an additional data point or an additional guidance that, of course, influences the decision, but it's not making it yet. So I'm a bit skeptical about any kind of AI making the final diagnosis in, let's say, the next couple of years, maybe even the next 5 years. Maybe we've got there too. But in any case, any insight that we can get from data that is already there, I believe is a huge value add, because it makes the process more informed. Even if we take it with a pinch of salt, it's always something that can give us a clue to get a better diagnosis or be a bit more proactive in terms of healthcare.
Yeah, or at least point the problem. Yeah, that's great. That's great idea, and I think it will have an impact. We'll see how the field will develop. But in order for the field to develop, people need to have funding. So I know you're operating in the European Union predominantly. So what is the situation with the funding opportunities in Europe for biotech startups? What is your experience? Is it easy for people to raise funds, particularly for medical diagnostics, or is it not that popular at the moment? What is your impression?
Yeah, I think it depends on the trends and the priorities of both the venture capital community and the European Commission at the moment. And I wouldn't say it's a terrible situation. There's still some opportunities, maybe on the lower end, for doing some pilots. There are some accelerator programs. They even offer some kind of awards or money that you can use to build some prototypes or do a little bit of development or business development work to start prototypes or pilots. But on, let's say, the growing needs and demands for funds that come with a clinical trial, for example, or all the administrative work that needs to be done to get reimbursement, which is the holy grail of any diagnostic solution, for example. It requires a lot of resources, and still the venture capital community is not very friendly to long time to market R&D risk defined businesses. And the interesting thing about healthcare, I believe, is that they're typically perceived from the outside as high risk from the research and scientific point of view and the regulatory point of view. But not too many people realize that they're relatively low in terms of business and commercialization risk afterwards. So yes, you do a lot of heavy lifting to the point, but once you prove it, but mainly because the process of proving it is so hard, by definition, you've bulletproofed yourself. And even as the process of regulatory approvals, you've got conversations with opinion leaders, with the actual future customers, let's call it, of your product, like, the clinicians, the healthcare professionals, the healthcare systems themselves, and you've basically been able to nail a solution that is pretty tailored and works pretty well for its target audience. So it's more like a little bit of a, let's say, propagation that I'm making that way, but I believe there's a huge potential to medtech and healthtech startups, but still the funding opportunity from the VC point of view in the European Union itself, it's quite restricted. On the grant funding side of things, again, as I briefly mentioned, there are different, let's say, small funding opportunities, typically ranging between a few tens and a few hundreds of thousands of euro. Or let's call it program, project, acceleration program, etc. But to aim for a little bit higher funding, typically the problem is that there are not too many healthcare-oriented funds, grant funding programs. And there are some general innovation-oriented programs, like, let's say, the EIC, the European Innovation Council program. And it's very competitive because it compares robotics to healthcare, to space technology, to military, to whatever. So, and then the healthcare projects are to a certain extent to disadvantage. Besides their their social, despite their social, let's say, impact, but they're very long in terms of time to market. So definitely a lot of things can be done to improve the flourishment of healthcare technologies out of Europe. Of course, maybe these things sometimes take a time or a decade or a generation even, but I do believe that there is space for healthcare innovations coming out of Europe.
That's very interesting, actually. I find it really weird that they wouldn't have specific funds for healthcare, because everyone is talking in research how they want to improve access to drugs and medical devices in Europe, and at the same time not having funds to support your startups that work in that field specifically. I find that very strange, but it's not unusual. I spoke recently to another entrepreneur in America, and we were discussing drug development, and they see something similar. Early stage startups don't get the funding. Normally everything goes into the later stage companies where, it's more guarantee you're going to have the final return of your investment. But the problem is, if you don't have the early stage companies, how on earth you're going to have the late stage companies? At some point, I think the market will be saturated, and they'll need to have more investment in early stage. And I hope this will happen. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting dynamic because it depends from whose perspective you're looking. I do believe that we need to have competition and smaller independent vendors that become eventually very big and even outcompete the big players, the strategics. I believe the way currently technology innovation happens in the health tech and the medtech spaces is through acquisitions, which from my entrepreneurial perspective is not the greatest option of all. And there are many reasons to that, but just to explain my understanding of the process first. Now, there's some research that is seriously done, typically through university spin-offs, maybe like in our case, a company spin-off, which is more of an exception for a type of a spin-off than a typical situation, but that's what our situation is, and still this is giving us some leverage to not be directly dependent on venture capital and still be able to do some long-term research with a long time to market. But anyway, let's assume we are the small guys, and we're able to advance on the path to clearance, either doing the regulatory or negotiating reimbursements or something, scrapping our way to there, to put it that way. And then the big player comes, and maybe they've been even supporting you earlier to an accelerator program, so they're keeping an eye on you, and they acquire and actually scale it and commercialize it. There are pros and cons to that approach, and of course there's a lot of perceived risk from the outside if this is going to happen. So I think this is one of the reasons why, let's say, investors are more strict or more or less risk oriented. At the same time, on the matter of not having the healthcare specific things, there's initiatives like EIT Health, and they have a lot of support, but again, it's for the super early stage. Maybe what's missing is this kind of a jump from now you have a prototype, proof of concept, maybe have some pilots with a hospital, but go all the way through costly clinical trials and reimbursement negotiations. And, if you hear VC saying, that's great, that's amazing, but, get the clearance first, well, this is typically the value that you need to jump over. So not always very helpful response, but, that's the way it currently is. Maybe some successful entrepreneurs in this space will change things in the future and create funds themselves. And this is on our long-term agenda as well.
That's very interesting. Yeah, everyone wants you to have done all the work, and then they'll give you the money. It's a general rule. And then talking about the work, I'm coming to my last question, which is what are the biggest challenges, according to you, for biotech startups in generating clinical research data? I'm in one regulatory forum where we have a lot of questions, particularly from companies that work with AI and diagnostics and softwares, medical devices, and so on. And people have a lot of questions how to design their studies and how many patients they need and so on. So what is your experience, according to your experience, what is the biggest challenge at the moment in setting up clinical trials and generating that data?
Yeah, Yeah, well, there are many. This makes the whole thing both challenging and rewarding and interesting, but also timely. So, starting on the more general side, the lack of experience of entrepreneurs, and this is kind of natural. Typically, the people who are coming with innovative ideas, a huge part of being able to be innovative is that they're not that much burdened by the previous experience of failing to do something in a particular space. So we as innovators are, initially maybe a little bit blue skyish and getting more realistic, but still have the vision and the broad horizon where we want to bring something new and unique and unorthodox to the practice. And this, by definition, means that we don't have the experience there yet. And on a side note, we're actually part of a U.S. market access-oriented program, one of the most successful medical device accelerators called MedTech Innovator. We just got enrolled in the end of June, and this is going until November. So I'm saying that because a huge part of their mission is to actually help entrepreneurs to bridge that gap of being inexperienced about all the different and so many, unfortunately, are not moving parts in building a medtech or healthcare solution. And with that said, the lack of experience is, I think, one of the huge burdens of the entrepreneur. The second one, especially in the area of AI, is the fact that so many things are not standardized yet. And this is a new field, but the regulators have a hard time to catch up with what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Do you need to prove your data sources, or you just need to be tested as a sandbox, as a black box, and measure the outcomes or the results? Do you can you actually alter the solution, because we know about the design freeze that is typical of academic trials. But what happens if you want to improve your algorithms with all the data that you are collecting in the future? How can you, let's say, speed up this process? Just one particular example of a dynamic that is very typical for AI solutions, but not acceptable in the current way how most regulatory processes are defined. And of course, regulators are, I believe, sensing and feeling that we don't want to hold science and technology back, so there need to be ways to accommodate, but it takes time, again, as with any regulatory-related procedure in any field. And of course, healthcare is so regulated because the stakes are high. We talk about human lives and human health. So the lack of funding that we just kind of referred to is also a challenge, because you maybe hold yourself back sometimes because you don't have too many shots. You cannot repeat a trial 5 times. You almost need to get it right at one shot in the beginning, and this creates a bit of a holdback effect where you want to set everything right from the very start of the process. This is not a bad thing, but this means a lot of time, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur or a first-time health tech professional who cannot hire super expensive people on board to learn all the things and make all the conversations and have people getting you seriously enough so they can support you and talk with you, and engaging the different regulators where it's possible. One of the reasons why we put a lot of focus on the U.S. market and the FDA and the U.S. reimbursement schemes right now is that they have some standardized procedure where you can engage them in a pre-submission interview and get a lot of your questions answered, or at least starting the process of getting a lot of your questions answered. And this is one of the very immediate next steps for us.
That's very good. I think the takeaway from what you're saying is it would be great if we have maybe specialized support from regulators for startups, because it's completely different conversation if you're talking to a big corporation that has experience, or a company that has experience, in the field. But if you're talking about to a startup where they need the initial advice, I think we need different type of advice probably, which is more tailored for the startups. This is something that I think could be a potential solution that could help the biotech startups in designing their clinical trials and find out what kind of data they need. So that scientific advice, maybe it's a good thing to have from the regulators, if you agree with me as a recommendation that we can give.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit too good to be true, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. So I think programs like MedTech Innovator were exactly created because of that gap and the fact that a startup doesn't have typically the resources or the network to engage with all the key stakeholders in the process, or even know that they should go there. And typically this is kind of middle-manned by, put it that way, by consultants. But of course, then the consultants needs to be startup friendly, both in terms of budget and understanding of the lack of understanding that startup founders typically have about everything that needs to be done. And having this, as you briefly mentioned, and I also referred to, we've been part of multiple accelerators. Now, MedTech Innovator being the most recent and current one. Before that, we were part of MedLim, which is an accelerator initiative by Medtronics, European headquarters in Limburg area, and local organizations in Maastricht that aim to support entrepreneurship and innovation to be developed there. And even with them, they have a lot of vertical specialists in their specific subfields that they structure in a large organization like Medtronic. And then when we are having questions about something that's actually very overarching, so how all these different things are coordinated, and we can solve one piece of the puzzle, but without context, maybe we didn't even solve the right problem or didn't ask the right question to solve the problem. And it turned out that it's very hard to have an overarching specialist or consultant that you can ask things, because everybody has been so profiled in their own specific field. And then if you ask about something that's more interdisciplinary, you have a very, very hard time to find the person who can ask that question. And that's where maybe sharing some experience between different generations of entrepreneurs is also helping, not only in the medical space, particularly in space. And this is part of your joking remark about me teaching technology entrepreneurship. It's kind of a philanthropic activity on my side to share in a very condensed format without a huge time commitment, but still quite intensively share some of my lessons learned with new generations of entrepreneurs, because I think this is very important, and this can boost the next generations to be way more productive and efficient, and basically advancing the state of technology and innovation further much faster.
That's brilliant, Georgi. And by the way, that's something similar that I'm trying to do as well. I'm trying to share information with people and help them, something that could give them some guidance and some directions. I even work with some companies in AI field where they were trying to develop some product in clinical research. So I advise them, because that's exactly what you're saying. They're missing sometimes the actual practical experience, field experience, hands-on experience, which is I could share with them. So yeah, I agree. I think it's more of a collaborative work, and if people have support, we can have a lot of good products on the market. And I'll finish on this positive note. I think there are a lot of great companies out there that with a little bit support, they can make it, and they can have products on the market which will change the patient's life. So I think that's a very important thing to remember when we're talking about startups and their work. I would like to thank you again for all your time today, just speaking to me, Georgi, and it was very interesting discussion. And thank you to our listeners as well.